we're very happy to have him now as our chair.
Thank you, Heather, for your kind remarks and introductions of the family especially. I want to thank Richard and Robin for hosting this event and doing a very nice job and getting together the family of the board. I want to thank the family, the Emeny family that honored us with their presence today. This is a very special occasion for the council, and I hope you will hear our feelings about the great leader that we had a few years ago. I want to thank George and his great committee that spearheaded, the thinking process and the planning for this function and future functions, hopefully. And I want to thank all the board members for coming and attending and supporting this. I want to thank Maura for the great support and logistical arrangements. She's our new executive director and doing a great job. So, thank you. And I just want to say a few words that after the very generous bequest of the Emeny family to the council, there was a lot of discussion at the board level on how to best recognize this gift, very generous gift, and it was taken in steps, and George and his team and several members on the board saw the need to do several things, and the first one is this event. This is very personal. It will allow us to be with you and to get to know you and to get you updated about the state of the council. The second thing is preparing the brochure that you saw and you have, and this summarizes some of the highlights of Brooks' life achievements and especially contribution to the council and to Cleveland, because he really put Cleveland on the map internationally. So make sure that you take this brochure, and we will make sure that we distribute this brochure in future events, and it will be on our site, and keep it going. So this is a very nice memory that the committee did. Also, the committee and the board is supporting having an annual event where hopefully that we can do it annually, a big event in the city, and we will be presenting Brooks Emeny Award to distinguished people who had international affairs service and prominent in their field. And actually, we locked in the first date and the first event. It's going to be October 1st next year. And we're very fortunate to have Mr. Dick Celeste being the speaker for the first event. He was the former governor of Ohio, former head of the Peace Corps, and an ambassador to India, very distinguished gentleman. And I want to thank Mr. Dick Pork for chairing that event, or agreeing to chair that event next year. So we're in the planning for that, and we hope that you book your dates to be with us October 1st of next year. Heather recognized the committee. I also want to thank them, Jean, Michael, Barb, Richard, Don, so I hope I didn't miss any. Great work for the committee, and they will keep things. Barb Hawkins. Where's Barb? Where's Barb? Okay. They will keep the work going in that direction. Now I'm going to get into my written remarks, because I enjoyed tremendously reading the writings of Brooks. Unfortunately, I can't memorize it, and it's not fair for me to try to memorize it, so I miss a word here or there. I think his words were made of gold, really, and so I put it in papers. I was reading about Mr. Emeny's history and writings, and I was humbled by what I found. Energy, vision, leadership, zeal, worldly thinking, and commitment to peace. I didn't know what to include in few minutes of presentation, so I thought the best way to honor his memory and contribution is to focus more on his ideas and thoughts that reflected the era he lived in. between two major world wars and afterwards, with major transformational forces in the US and the whole world. I will touch on his work at the Council, and I am, like you, would love to hear about his life and personal stories directly from his family. So we're anxious to know the inside story here. I chose few excerpts from his work to reflect his ideas rather than my own personal impressions. I quote one of his paragraphs: "Just as circumstances beyond our conscious control have placed us on the dizzy heights of unchallengeable security and overwhelming potential strength at home, so must our ability to guide intelligently the future destiny of this country rest upon the development of true consciousness of our inherent power." Consciousness of power, between parentheses, consciousness of power, however, denotes both the ability to time its utilization as well as the wisdom to know when to withhold it. And think about this consciousness of power. If it was exercised, how many wars could have been avoided? So was the thinking of Dr. Brooks Emeny as he delivered a speech at the Institute of Public Affairs, University of Virginia in June 1940. Words that resonate in our contemporary world politics 72 years later. Born in Salem, Ohio in 1901, Brooks graduated from Princeton University in 1924, went to Europe as a Carnegie Fellow, was influenced by U.S. Ambassador to France, a Clevelander, Mr. Byron Herrick, who steered him into a career in education and public affairs. It became his mission and his destiny. His two major writings were published in 1934 and 1935, The Strategy of Raw Materials, a study of America in peace and war, and the second one is The Great Powers in World Politics. Soon after the First World War, a group of active women in Cleveland formed an organization to support peace efforts. It evolved into the Council for the Prevention of War, headed by Mr. Newton Baker. In 1935, Mr. Baker lured Mr. Emeny to direct the local Foreign Affairs Council that evolved into the Cleveland Council on World Affairs. Brooks did that with distinct success for 12 years. Under his tenure, Mr. Brooks brought an unmatched energy to the council. Its membership swelled to over 5,000 members. Its meetings were attended by hundreds of people. It became the leading voice of international education and understanding in the city. We all have a challenge. A challenge. Mr. Emeny saw to it that his efforts should have no borders and boundaries. A true internationalist, he led a national campaign against the isolationist voices in the country, invited foreign dignitaries, officials and ambassadors, business people and educators. He ran international conventions through the council in Cleveland. One of his conventions ended on the day Pearl Harbor was bombed in 1941. In January 1947, in January 1947, he had the largest convention yet, attended by dignitaries from 13 countries in Cleveland, titled A Report to the World on Post-World II Era. This report contributed to the Marshall Plan for Europe 5 months later. And many historians believe that the initial seeds of the Marshall Plan, the planning, the thinking behind it, came out of this meeting and the directions and the vision of Mr. Brook Emeny. Mr. Emeny left Cleveland in 1947 to become the president of the Foreign Policy Association in New York till 1952. He then served as an advisor to Princeton's Woodrow Wilson Institute for 25 years till 1980. He was passionate about Cleveland, referenced it frequently with its industrial and manufacturing power at that time. His stewardship of the Council on World Affairs placed Cleveland on the international political map. And just think of that report that came out of their convention in 1947. In 1940, he wrote, "We must preserve intact the power of this nation, not only to defend this nation, but in order that we utilize that power at such times and under such circumstances as we usefully can in rebuilding the world's economic, political, and social structure." We use the power of the United States in building the world's economic, political, and social structure. In 1946, he presented a keynote lecture for the Council in Cleveland, stating, quote, "The biggest dilemma of our contemporary world derives from the fact that nations and people exist at present on vastly different levels of thought, political experience, and economic development, at the very moment in human history when they should be working together to achieve peace and security." He called the areas of conflicts in the world, such as the Middle East, vacuum areas, between parentheses, and said, "Unless the superpowers can solve together the unprecedented problems of vacuum areas relationships, nothing can save the world from another war." And I have to say, nothing can save it from more wars unless these vacuum areas in the world are attended to in a positive, engaging, and meaningful way. He goes on to say, "The modern state today is too puny in relation to the mighty forces of world affairs to guarantee any longer the security of its citizens. There is the necessity, therefore, of the development of the larger allegiance of world sovereignty under world law from which all people may derive protection, and the development of human welfare. We should have no illusions over the problems involved in the creation of world controls through world government. And if we arrive at the point of establishing a world authority to control the bomb or general disarmament itself, we shall already have the beginnings of world government." I know the term world government is somewhat controversial, but think about it for somebody who wrote this in 1946, after the devastation of the Second World War. 50 million people died in Europe. That's supposed to be the center of modern industry and technology and culture. You know, Europeans killed each other for 50 millions of them probably. And there was, the world was in deep darkness, with the destruction, with no future. And there was a need for the world collectively to start working on these issues together. And actually, he wrote this in 1946. The United Nations started, or the very first seeds of the United Nations started in 1945. So this was the thinking at that time, how the world should get together and have some common rules to prevent more destruction and wars. Then he concludes his major speech by saying, "The tragedy is that the facts, forces, and dilemmas which have been outlined, clear as they are not generally understood and certainly do not form the basis of thinking of our national leaders. Nothing can be done in Washington until the people speak with understanding. For Washington obviously cannot dictate to the people. It has become the supreme obligation of every community in the country and of their leaders to see to it that their citizens are given full opportunities of education in the meaning of our modern world." This is his push for education. "You see, therefore, my friends, why it is that the Cleveland Council on World Affairs is so important. There is so much more that the Council can still do with your help in providing the needs of this community." These are his challenging words to all of us so many years later. Mr. Brooks Emeny has inspired our community with his leadership, vision, and energy. He challenged us to develop and maintain our collective efforts for a strong council for our own and future generations in this great city. He challenged our generosity and dedication with his endowed support of the council to keep it strong into the future. On behalf of the board of directors and all members of the council, I would like to extend our utmost admiration for Mr. Brooks Emeny achievements, our utmost gratitude for his generous gift to the council, and our utmost appreciation for his family, who honored his wishes towards the council. As his memory is cherished by his own family, it will also be cherished by this Cleveland Council family. To the honorable family members of Mr. Brooks Emeny, thank you again for being here. We promise you and promise our community that we will maintain his legacy with great pride and honor and for years to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.